is our mechanic driving the Tucker Snowcat with Merle Southern talking to the mechanic and jumping off the sled. If we broke down mechanically, we had to wait several days for parts ordered from the States. The Tucker Snowcat was used only by Ohio State scientists, and it required the mechanic to keep it operating. But he wasn't very reliable, forcing my team and me to do much of the repairs ourselves. We used the water maker to produce large amounts of drinking and cooking water. Surprisingly, dehydration was a real threat to those working in the Antarctic. Because of the cold, some people's systems don't tell them when they need water and they become dehydrated. Sir Charles Wright told me in one of our conversations that he had become dehydrated and doctors had ordered him to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Forcing himself to do that, he said, was the hardest thing he ever had to do. Fortunately, my system told me when I needed water, and I drank copious amounts. Many people don't realize that the Antarctic is overall the largest desert in the world by averaging only 5 to 6 inches of precipitation a year. I'm bracing myself around a pole to emphasize the problem for Reston's benefit we were having with pole stabilization so that observation could be accurately done to close triangles. Me again with the wild T3, a theodolite with a roll-off prism observing the limbs of the sun for an azimuth. The story of this astropure is interesting. The geodesic dome was built in the 1974-75 season before the advent of the GPS. I was told at that time that it was desirable to have the dome built as much as 10 years upstream from the actual geodesic South Pole. USGS surveyors needed to determine the speed and direction of the glacial flow from their astro observations. The Coast and Geodetic Agency had established an astropure in 1963. As yearly observations were needed, the USGS became involved in 1964. The team of Zeke Sosa, Al Zavis, Charlie Morrison, and me set our own pier in my first season in 1964. This photo of our team, consisting of me with Bill Marshall, Bruce Schwartz, and Merle Southern, was taken during observations in 1967. We built the pier by banding together 3 4x4s and upending them in a hole dug as deeply as we could with an ice auger. The hole was filled with slush, which quickly froze to solid ice, providing a rigid construction. This instrument is called a DKM3. It was used for all our astro observations because of what is called a broken telescope design, allowed the observer to read a star at any altitude or position. As I remember, weather then at Pole Station, it remained good at minus 20 degrees. We completed the multiple desired observation on stars, which was 6 stars in each of the 4 cardinal directions, plus observations on 5 more stars, totaling 29 stars. Merle told me later that we achieved a spread of only 32 feet. This spread, of course, was not near the accuracy of today's GPS, but with that existing technology, it was quite good. Our mechanics specialized in the construction of igloos. They served 2 purposes. One was that they were a safety feature. If our tents were destroyed by extreme storms, we were safe and secure in the igloo. Also, igloos could serve as our latrines. An ice saw was used to cut blocks of ice. Left to right, this photo is of Bruce Schwartz, Merle Southern, and me with the mechanic checking his igloo construction. Our tents are outside the latrine. We are under the front of the Nodwell placing a generator. Pole number 105, end of the line in parentheses. This double pole shows that I was the only one that participated in both the years 1964 and 1967. This photo includes Ohio State scientists as well as the 4 USGS surveyors. This picture shows a typical structure called a Jamesway, which was built of wood arches and a canvas covering. They were built when it was determined that various scientific disciplines that involved a lot of personnel would be operating in the same location for the season. Then the CBs would be called upon to construct a Jamesway for their living quarters. All the rest of the equipment lying around was used by the various disciplines. The use of the Jamesway is said to have been scheduled for discontinuance in 1990. This is another camp scene, which includes a GPS antenna. This is the prototype of our modern GPS. I'd like to tell you my history with this instrument. In 1964, I noticed several scientists in the tunnel at Byrd Station working on something. As I began my astro observations for latitude and longitude, one of these guys called out and remarked, "Dave, you are going to be replaced." As I become aware of what they were doing, I realized that the Antarctic is the ideal place to work on upper atmospheric physics. They were working for Motorola and the military development of the GPS. In my second season in the Antarctic in 1967, I was again doing astro observations at Byrd Station. Those same scientists said, "Dave, you are going to be replaced," in parentheses. As I knew that time, I asked an obvious question. "How close do you repeat your observations?" They said, "Within a quarter of a mile." "That's not good enough," I said, "because some of our observations resulted in a spread of not more than 30 feet. By my last tour in 1977, the prototype of the GPS had been developed by these scientists in the tunnel at Byrd Station. Scientists with the Army's 29th Engineers trained USGS personnel in its use and how to resolve our position from the resulting tapes. In other words, I wasn't replaced, but my equipment was. That equipment, including the unit, batteries, tape dispenser, and antenna, weighed a total of 250 pounds. Compare that to our modern smartphones with GPS. There is a reason for that strung out line of equipment on the ice. Sometimes in bad weather, C-130 pilots would land the C-130 as close to us as possible. The flight crew would open the rear ramp and unfasten all pallets of supplies. The pilot started his takeoff, and anything loose, including the pallets, would slide out on the open ramp. Did all supplies survive those deliveries intact? Unfortunately, no. For example, a badly needed generator was destroyed. This very powerful British plane that was loaned to the USGS had gotten frozen down in the ice. It took a lot of time and effort to free it. It seemed for a time that heavy equipment would be needed. Everyone around joined in the effort, including the geologists and the cartographers. The pilot rewarded me for photographing the whole affair by flying toward me before finally taking off. The coordination and accuracy between the driver and the loader impressed and amused us. I took this film from inside the C-130 at the geographic South Pole, where the remainder of this film was shot. The dark line in the background is Quonset figures that house garages and storage facilities. It leads into the huge geodesic dome, which was built over the barracks, mess hall, radio facility, all the buildings at the South Pole Station. This dome spanned 164 feet and topped out at 52 feet. Pole Station is located on a continental glacier at an elevation above sea level of 9,300 feet. Atmospheric conditions there put the equivalent elevation in the U.S. at over 11,000 feet. Even the powerful C-130 needs the JETO assist to get airborne at the South Pole. These Quonset fingers lead to the geodesic dome. By my third season, several of the Quonset tentacles were nearly covered with snowdrifts, as seen here. Also, by this time, a permanent GPS station was established at Pole that included a year-round caretaker who wintered over. It was established, as I was told, to study and record the wobble of the Earth's axis. The pipe pictured represents the station mark for the South Pole. There's the geodesic dome partly covered with snowdrifts. We were there only in the daylight summertime. On one particularly nice sunny day, I remember the thermometer registered only minus 22 degrees, as good as it gets there. These shots are flags of all the nations involved in Antarctic exploration. Note the iconic barber pole. Signs indicate the average temperature of minus 56 degrees. It reads an altitude of 9,186 feet and ice thickness of over 9,000 feet. Chris was able to clean up the image to make it legible. Someone constructed a pole noting distances to places worldwide. As far as we could see in all directions, we saw nothing but flat continental glacier and Pole Station in the distance. This is the entrance to the geodesic dome. We had good times taking advantage of the snow buildup on one side of the geodesic dome, sledding like little kids. In my first season, USGS surveyors had Antarctic features named for them. I believe I was one of the last member to be so honored. Here is the location of an attack named Reed.